This is WKNC 88.1 FM Raleigh. I'm your host, The Loaf, and this is Off the Record, an interview podcast series here at WKNC where artists of all shapes, sizes, genres, and backgrounds are interviewed. In this edition, I had the pleasure of speaking with Casey of Canary Complex, a Visual K solo project. You might know them as a guitarist from Flood District and my interview with that group, but this is their solo project, Canary Complex, which is super dope. That song that played at the beginning of the podcast was Eden off of Canary Complex sophomore album, The Tragic Dance of Dying Leaves. So, Canary Complex, Casey, how are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Thank you so much for having it. Thank you so much for being in the studio. Sorry.
Yeah, we're both very polite people. We're just trying not to step in each other's way here.
Yeah. So we're about halfway through the I guess sort of just like general sort of feelings. We're about halfway through a little bit over halfway through the year now. That's halfway through 2023. How's it been treating you? It's been good, bad, or so? So you obviously have been doing a lot of musical stuff as well. So how's the year been generally treating you?
I can honestly say that 2023 has been the best year of my life thus far.
Nice.
It's been nothing but positivity. At least if we're speaking from an artistic, musical standpoint, it's just been consistent movement, and I couldn't be happier.
Nice. I will say we also I forgot to introduce. We also have Michael on the mic.
From the depths, I enter.
From the depths,
I enter the pod.
From Flood District. You helped Casey with the album, correct?
Yes.
At least some parts of it. So, obviously, once we get a little bit more into that, we'll hear from your perspective. But you can just talk or whatever. It's fine.
Yes.
Whatever you want. All right. So first off, Canary Complex. That is a pretty dope name. I think that there's sort of like, especially the complex part of it. I think it definitely sort of your music is very complex. At least for me, there's a lot of different elements sort of into it. Where'd you get the name from? Sort of how did it come to be?
So the name initially started. It was. Sorry, this is going to be like a whole TED talk.
No problem.
Canary Complex. Initially, it was a short story that I wrote, and it was about a painter who lived at the top of a high-rise apartment in Manhattan, and he thought his entire existence was like a canary trapped in a cage, and the cage being his tiny apartment. Get it? Canary Complex, apartment complex.
Okay.
It's not that deep.
Oh.
That name. It was just a short story, but it was kind of like, it led the way for me to just say, okay, I'm going to use that for a solo project. But I didn't make any moves with it. Michael was around at the time when I first started recording as Canary Complex, and it was, to say the least, not very substantial compared to what I'm doing now.
I mean, I think the material was very good. You just weren't as good at recording it.
Yeah, and I was a bad singer, but we made our way here.
No, I was supposed to say that's the one thing that I think is like, you stand out a lot from like just like everybody else is that you are just an excellent singer.
Oh,
I feel like you have a lot of vocal range in your voice, and it's sort of like it's very sort of just like always out there. It's just very I don't know, just like it's deep, but yeah, it's just like very like high. It's like I don't know.
Wow, thank you so much.
You do have a lot of that vocal range. So how long has Canary Complex been around? Essentially, so how long have you had that idea?
So. Conceptually, like I said, it was probably maybe a year after I wrote that short story that I decided to start writing and recording my own music. That was like 2014, 2013. It doesn't matter as much now because it didn't become really active until like 2018. And what led to this incarnation of Canary Complex and what made me fall in love with the concept and the name is I was sort of hit with a barrage of tragic events. It was one after the other. And I realized then that Canary Complex also meant something else. It wasn't just the name of the short story.
Mm-hmm.
You probably know this, Tyler. I'm sure everyone listening probably does too. But canaries, they were carried down into the mines with coal miners. And they were brought down there so that if oxygen starts running low, their little lungs would collapse and they would die before humans would.
That's what I assumed it was in relation to the whole time.
Yeah. And it was sort of like, they'd stop singing. And that's just a cute little sacrifice so that the miners could escape alive.
Mm-hmm.
And when a person goes through something horrible, Sorry, you can hear me turning pages. I just made some notes for myself. Anxiety will ensure that we're hypervigilant and on edge all the time. We're ready for that next tragedy to strike. And that's my canary. It's kind of my disorder, my complex. It never goes away. The sense of dread that something bad is going to happen anytime. And I know that's probably not a unique story, but I feel like it's probably very relatable to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm no scientist, but I put a name to a disorder,
Yeah.
And that's canary complex. That's
Yeah.
it.
Okay.
Look out, TikTok.
That's I do definitely think that a lot of people can relate to that, especially in a sort of age of just sort of a lot of mental well-being awareness sort of coming to the forefront
Yes.
of a lot of things. And I think that having something like as simple as a name of a sort of of your solo project being that relatable is definitely super strong and just super just sort of like vulnerable. And I think
you.
that is definitely sort of comes out in your music and also, your solo project in general.
Thank you so much.
So it's like a state of mind.
Yeah.
And like the music is like that. See, I didn't know this either. I'm coming in.
I realized
I'm coming in
that-
cold.
Yeah.
I'd
yeah.
never told Michael this story.
I'm the perfect third person. For
Yeah,
this.
there you go.
Yeah.
Involved.
I
but
brought
not
you in
quite
as
much.
you're the everyman character for this.
Yes, I'm so the audience can relate to you. Anyway, no, but I mean, it makes sense to me, right? Like you're describing like very, like, currently normal feelings that a lot of people have. I relate to that very much, but like the expression of it is what's unique, right? Not
Mhm.
necessarily the core idea.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You've done it.
So, so going in from that for a little bit, let's talk more generally about sort of like your music and sort of what gets you there, sort of in your mind, in your brain. So I mentioned earlier in the introduction that you're a Visual K solo project.
Mm-hmm.
For those who don't know what Visual K is, can you give like a very general sort of synopsis and sort of like some tidbits of it?
For those who didn't tune into the Flood District.
Yeah, if you did do the flood district thing, but
Yeah, no, you can just grab my little section from Flood District and drop it in, and we'll have the other bandmates chiming in out of nowhere. No, it's Visual K is a very specifically Japanese musical subculture. Initially it grew out of glam rock and post-punk of the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of the early days of Visual K were like a hybrid of post-punk and glam. So you had like the goth imagery with like all black and the very, very striking makeup, but they also had the huge hair of these glam artists
Mhm.
and the more flamboyant aspects of that, just much more goth.
Mm-hmm.
And it's evolved in several directions since then. I mean, Visual K is less of a musical genre identifier, but more of a way of describing.
Like a whole subculture.
It's
like
a
how
whole
goth
subculture.
isn't just a music
Yeah.
style, it's the whole thing.
I think goth is a perfect comparison because
Yeah.
goth isn't just an image and it's not just music. It's a whole subculture with
Yeah.
a mindset and a lifestyle.
Just imagine you've never heard of goth before. You suddenly hear goth. It's like that all in.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's so many different like musical subgenres of goth. And the same could be said for Visual K.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's like death metal bands. There's like pop bands.
Mm-hmm.
It's very not just a musical genre, but also it's very much an aesthetic and a culture and just sort of like something that can sort of encompass a sort of somebody's whole personality and sort of everything, right?
Absolutely.
But there's a vibe. There's like shared
Yes.
vibe for certain. Like
That's
people
what
can
I
be
was-
all over the place. But go on.
No, you're
the vibe.
good. That's what I was going to say. Like, amongst all the Visual K bands, no matter what genre they are, it's probably simply because they come from the same region and they grew up listening to the same influences, which are distinctly different from what we in the West grew up listening to.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
There's a very unique songwriting style that Visual K artists encompass, and I think it's a matter of the way they put their chord progressions together.
Yeah.
Like, we tend to focus on 4-bar chord progressions, and they might focus on 8, sometimes 16-bar chord progressions.
Yeah.
And it creates a sound. It's a very, people say like, that's anime intro or that's Sonic music.
But they were listening to the same music too at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's like
it's distinctly Japanese. I think that's what we're trying to say.
That's like be like saying like a American video game soundtrack from like the Genesis sounds like a grunge record because they were listening to grunge.
Yeah,
and it
exactly.
Was 95. Like
exactly.
It's the same thing.
Absolutely.
I do definitely see at least like I guess generally just like also you're talking about goth, but also like grunge as well. Where it's like that might be something where grunge was not only musical genre but also just sort of like a subculture and sort of just like a visual style and aesthetic.
Yes,
absolutely.
Britpop
That's what I brought out to it.
It's like the same era. And sorry, I'm totally butting.
No.
But this very specific part of this discussion is like
this is what the people want to hear.
Is incredibly fascinating to me. Like the notion that like in a pre-internet music scenes, which like I was like just not pre-internet, but like social media, I guess. Like I was like just barely involved in before. I never had MySpace before. Social media was like the thing.
Yeah.
Like I remember like Lorelai didn't upload anything to Spotify until like 2017.
Lorelai is Michael's old
because
man.
we were on YouTube. Yeah, because we were on YouTube. But like that's not the point. The point is that like that's fascinating to me that like in like say I don't know like 94, right? Like over here it's like Nevermind and In Utero, right? And that's like it. Yeah. And then like in the UK, like that's a thing, but then it's like I don't know, like Massive Attack Protection and like Blur and Oasis, and that's like everything. And then in Japan, you're getting like Mother by Luna Sea, or you're like getting like Art of Life by X Japan, and these are in different parts of the world. I wasn't in those parts of the world at that time, obviously, but as I see looking back, they seem to be like all like equivalencies of like these are pop music, but then like one of these is like deeply neoclassical influence, like rock and pop and metal. And another one is, Nirvana, and another one is Blur. It's very interesting that you take disparate influences and you have different ideas of what is 90s music.
Correct.
Anyway, that's a huge can of worms that I won't continue.
I love this can of worms. We can just cancel Canary Complex and make it about that.
Too.
But Canary is like literally, to me, that's what that is, because it's like everybody right now, for example, is into like 90s stuff, right?
Yes.
And I would argue that Casey is pulling from a lot of 90s stuff, but like an entirely different section of the world's pre-internet 90s scene, because he has the internet. Because we had the internet, we had YouTube when we were 14.
Okay.
So
yes,
it's very interesting.
It's
also, I saw the Darren Gray ad on Fuse in 2006. And that was actually what did it for me.
I was there too, friend. No, that is a really great way to put it. It's such a uniquely modern phenomenon that could have never happened before. Yeah, our generation.
You had to physically go over there. It's like Envy, like Envy blowing up in America, even though they're Japanese, before in Japan, because they like toured to California. But anyway, that's a whole other topic.
Yeah, no.
Oh no, it's so like I think that like this musical phenomenon is obviously very unique to the internet age, and will continue to influence and sort of just like be a core part of music in general, where it's like we have so much information, we have just so much just like access to it, to like different musics in different decades and different genres, that it is no wonder that an artist like you, Canary, or just like and like everybody else will take little bits and pieces of everything and sort of not necessarily smash it all together, because that seems very sort of just like primal, but sort of like meticulously kind of put it together like some puzzle to create a whole brand new image. That's sort of just I
love the way you put that.
That is very that's very consistent and is very beautiful and it's very nice. And I think that is definitely sort of what you have done with your sophomore album, The Tragic Dance of Dying Leaves. So I guess speaking more on to that sort of general sort of feeling, what was the process of combining all these different elements together into one musical piece in your latest project? Was it a lot of work? Was it just something that came like naturally to you? Like what was up with it?
Okay, so that, I guess that opens the door for me to explain a little bit about how this album came to be. My first record, it was called When I Say Rain. It was very meticulous. I worked so hard to put this piece of music out on my own, and I intentionally didn't accept any help from anyone. I wanted it to be from my soul because I had just gone through the series of tragedies that I mentioned earlier, and I wanted to put that into music. I wanted to write about this and put it out like therapy. And it was kind of an experiment. And so I did it all myself. It's not produced very well. It's very lo-fi, and it's honestly a little hard to listen to compared to compared to the Tragic Dance of Dying Leaves. But that was hard work. It was like I had to really work hard to write these songs. But after I got them out, the water gates had opened, or the floodgates, the flood district gates had opened.
The flood district gates have finally
That is true. I did ask him to join for unrelated reasons.
Yeah, actually, right after I put out my first album is when around the end.
It is interesting we had the same trajectory of timeline, 2013. Come up with idea. 2018 start idea. Please
Michael,
continue.
you and I are the same.
Edit all of me out of this.
No, Michael Rumpel and I, Casey, Canary Casey, we are the same person. Let it be known.
Just change it. He's just changing his voice.
Yeah, I'm speaking into one of those voice
very
changers.
impressive. Speak out that vocal range. Very impressive.
Thank you. But to shine a better light on the Tragic Dance of Dying Leaves, it's like when I started writing this album, the songs wrote themselves. They are so much more structured and textured, and I think of the first album being black and white, just like its album cover.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost entirely grayscale, and it sounds that way. There's very few glimmers of color in that album musically. The Tragic Dance is just, it's like opening the whole Crayola box or a painter's palette of oil paints. Much more tasteful colors than your Crayola.
Yeah.
Look at the album cover.
Gotta keep it broke here.
Yeah. So the colors all just poured out of me then. I think it was really interesting. I had to just get that sort of therapy out of the way before I could enjoy making music. And when I could enjoy it, because I did not enjoy the first album, not making it, not listening to it. If anyone enjoys it, I'm glad they do, but I don't. But it was therapy. But I love this sophomore album. I could listen to it myself because I feel like the best music is the amalgamation of all the things that you, the artist, are interested in. You're like grabbing, like you said earlier, grabbing pieces of this and that and meticulously crafting them together. So of course, that's going to become that's your baby, and you're going to love it if you do exactly that. It's the amalgamation of all that you like in this world.
And so I guess speaking more on just sort of what those pieces of things that you like, at least like on your sort of on your website and sort of just in general, you do sort of describe it as sort of with sort of impressionism, indie rock, goth, and baroque pop. You have a lot going on with this, and I definitely I personally really like the sort of like impressionist side of it.
Me too.
I definitely do enjoy that. So what exactly is, I guess, I don't know. I guess we can ask what exactly is impressionist, and what have you taken from it, and what do you like specifically about it that so much that you kind of just put it into the sort of art form and format. I know that it's technically like a musical style too, but I do like the art of it as well.
I feel like it's in reference to the art style.
Yeah.
In this particular instance.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, exactly. I have heard musical impressionism, and I get it, but it's not. I'm not channeling any of that. So specifically, it's the visual art. When I was a kid, I was just obsessed with one specific painting by Gustave Caillebotte. It's Paris Street Rainy Day. It's in Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Yeah.
And isn't that kind of funny how that is the reason that this album exists in some way?
Thank you, Ferris Bueller Day Off.
Thanks for skipping school, Ferris. But yeah, so it became an obsession for me for some reason. Like I saw that and it made me feel something. It was what we would call a vibe today, but I didn't know what it was called back then. And it kind of like every time I looked at it, I felt like I was in that place. It's a place in time that does not exist anymore, and it will never exist again. That specific moment in time, 1862 or whatever, that Gustave was looking at this street, this modern at the time architecture, and painting it, saying like, wow, look at this modern architecture. But now we, in today's age, we look at it and it's like, wow, that's so timeless and quaint.
Yeah.
But that's a little bit of a diversion. But that became my obsession. And that vibe I've always wanted to find a way to put the vibe that I felt as a kid into my music since I started making music. And not just Gustave Caillé, but branching out into Monet and Renoir, the specific palette of colors and the way that the colors are applied it gives like a misty aura to almost everything that you look at. It's dreamlike, it's blurred, and the colors are not refined. They're not mixed very well together. They can just like splatter some white on top of some yellow. And, from a distance you see a flower, but up close it's a mess.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to build my music kind of like that. And I think I succeeded with at least like stuff like Bel Esprit and Parasol, Deep Sky.
Mm-hmm.
They invoke a very specific place and time. And I know from everybody who I've asked, without cueing them as to what I was referencing, they tell me, they're like, that looks like a French painting. That sounds like a French painting.
Mm-hmm.
I think of the 1800s. And I'm like, yes, thank you. You caught it. Well, speaking of influences, I was channeling David Sylvian with the ending of Parasol. He was an 80s new wave artist,
dark
singer of a band called Japan. They were like very kind of like almost on the lighter end of the spectrum of new wave
Mm-hmm.
and new romantic. But he went off and did a solo project throughout the 90s, and his music is very, very dark and experimental because he will just grab musicians from here and there and not give them any cues, just say like, all right, well, here's an A minor chord. I want you to play something. And then he'll chop up what they laid down in the studio and build it, stack it together until he makes like some really out there music. And that's what I did with specifically the end of Parasol. I was like, what would David Sylvian do here?
Going back to sort of Impressionism, I at least artistically, at least so I did a lot of thinking as well with Impressionism and your music.
Nice. Thank you.
And something that really struck me when both listening to the album and researching on it is sort of the relationship between sort of visual kei and Impressionism that you have. So I think that you kind of perfectly described sort of Impressionism as a sort of just like more or less a snapshot of like what that was, like what that moment was, and
Yes.
and sort of like it, and sort of keeping it there. And I think that visual kei is very sort of at least how I would describe it, is very theatrical, sort of like flamboyant, sort of very out there and all type of
Absolutely.
stuff, which I believe would be. It's not necessarily like in stark contrast, but it's like kind of like opposite of sort of like Impressionism. Is this album and sort of a snapshot and an impression of your sort of complex and sort of like yourself in general? Sort of just like it's a snapshot that of what you are, like visual kei, all the influences, what you are as a person. And do you want that to live on forever? Sort of as a sort of like what music and what art is sort of in general. Is that something that you wanted to achieve? Is that something that sort of like you had going on? But
Absolute chills to that question. Yes. I think every artist, whenever they release a new album, they're like, this is the best thing I've ever made. My magnum opus.
yeah,
I'm not saying that. It's probably, I want to make
I'm
even
saying
better one day.
I think it's the best album.
But it is the best album I've ever made, but maybe not the best I will make.
yeah.
Part of them
However,
all.
I will never be like embarrassed by this album, or I'll never want to just like forget about it. I think it's a lot more universal than my first album because that was very specifically from my perspective, every song, my tragedy, not your tragedy. The Tragic Dance of Dying Leaves literally is something we all know. We don't just see the dying leaves outside, but we know that things go in cycles. People live and die and they're reborn, or well, concepts and art is reborn in different forms. I'm not trying to speak of reincarnation or anything spiritual here.
Yeah.
But I think that concept of writing songs from other perspectives, using my own experiences as fuel for that fire, is kind of what I did with this album. And I think that can relate to so many more people than what I did on the first one.
So yeah, so speaking on that, sort of being sort of universal and sort of just like a sort of everything. Is this is this sort of more? Did you want to capture that specifically, or did it sort of come that way? Because I know that with like a lot of just like with music, or at least how I look at music, is that I very much relate it to myself, like specifically. So, is that how you wanted everybody to feel? Sort of like take that as sort of like relate to themselves a lot more.
That was the goal.
Okay.
So I think I was channeling a lot more of the singer-songwriter style traditionally in my first album. I'm really into the band Bright Eyes, Connor Oberst being the lead singer, and his lyrical style is very personal. And it can be abstract, but it's never very decorative, or very rarely. Anyway, I'm not insulting Connor Oberst. I love Bright Eyes, but this new album, I felt like I wanted to channel more of being a storyteller while using my own experiences. So something like Belle Esprit, which is about a father who lost his daughter in La Belle Époque, which is like the Victorian version of, or France's version of what the Victorian era was in England. The Grand Age, the Golden Age is what it means, I believe. But he lost his daughter then, and she was a ballet dancer, and this grief drove him to just absolute delusion, and he thought that he can just recreate her from wood and use her like a marionette and make her dance. That becomes her. And the song is about him just like grappling with, I'm losing my mind, but it's better to have my daughter here with me while I lose my mind than not to.
Yeah.
And that grief is something I know very well, but I didn't write it like telling you the story of why I'm grieving. I wrote it like, here's a more interesting version of what I've gone through.
Okay.
So did you read a story similar to that and be like, I relate to that, I will write this as lyrics? Or did you feel that thing and think, I would like to create have a more creative way to express what I'm feeling that's less just for me?
Fantastic question. No, I didn't read that, but I saw a painting by Renoir, and I forgot the title, but it's like little girl sitting by the sea. And the story told itself to me. Like, I just saw that as being like a memorial picture of someone who may have lost this little girl. And it was painted in the era that I'm channeling in the song, of course.
You had your Frank Reynolds moment of
Yeah.
seeing the painting.
You're definitely like sort of like seeing it, and you're sort of like expanding it a lot more, creating your own stories, and sort of like through simple images and sort of everything.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, like something like that can tell a whole story if you just kind of let it. Obviously that's not what Renoir was thinking when he painted it, but I'm not Renoir, R.I.P. I'm trying to like pull what I can out of that.
Okay.
And that's what I found. And I wrote the song about it. And I feel like it's just an abstract version of me grappling with the grief that I might have tried to grapple with on the first album in a lot more of a cringy fashion, because you don't want to hear about my actual pain. I personally don't like to hear that. It's kind of hard.
Well, it's yours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That thing stopped getting input. Does that
No,
matter?
no, it's fine.
Okay, sorry to interrupt.
It's just asleep.
Oh, okay. Just making sure.
It's just asleep.
Got it.
Yeah, I
Still works.
would have panicked too if I saw that.
No, don't worry.
I'm sorry if that was like a long. My brain kind of like follows breadcrumbs, and I lose the plot sometimes.
Yeah, no problem. I love the sort of self-indulgence, especially sort of like digging into the minds of just sort of artists and sort of individuals, and always the best way to do that is through any art that they produce. And just sort of like, if you are, this goes for every like music artist in general, like you're already such a talented person for sort of bringing that self-indulgence, sort of that view, and sort of like bringing it to the masses in a very either clean or very sort of like pleasing way, no matter what. And I do definitely think that Belle Esprit, as you were describing it, sort of like making that story out of just a single painting, is definitely I think great, not beautiful necessarily.
Thank you. Truly, I appreciate it.
So again, with it, it's like, it's, I guess speaking on Belle Esprit in general, it's very sort of again is sort of like it's very like I guess out there and sort of like dreamy, like sort of a aspiration. I'm speaking like in general terms right now, but then it does also come to like a sudden stop. It's sort of just like a sort of it seems like a sort of sudden realization or smacking back from reality from like a trance.
Yeah.
Is that sort of like how you were feeling when you were sort of like when you come up with these like sort of like stories or sort of just like ways that are into it, you kind of like go off to the breadcrumbs and then you just sort of like snap back to it?
I never thought of it in those terms before, but yeah, I literally like I felt what you're describing. Just like the character in my story is kind of like indulging himself with this delusion of bringing his daughter back. At the end of the song, he kind of like does that last long note and then sort of wails, and it's like, wow, here we are. She's gone. I can't change that. And that's sort of like reflecting back to me. I sort of have to like, I always snap out of this like trance when I'm writing songs. And I think that subconsciously that's kind of what happened at the end of that song.
It's just sort of just like, I guess you're speaking on grief, sort of, again, I'm not trying to make assumptions, but sort of like dealing with the grief and coming to a reality with it.
Yeah.
Is that is that a good way to sort of describe it?
That's a great way to describe it, because the vocal that ended up on the song, it was actually like probably the second attempt at recording the vocals to that song. It was just it was intended to be a demo for me to like re-record later, and I tried many times.
I got
And
the same problem as me.
yeah, and Michael was like, "I don't think you're gonna beat that one," and we both agreed that it wasn't recorded the best. Like it sounds kind of lo-fi as a main vocal, but
Well, it came across in the final product, but
it did.
If it weren't like massaged heavily and able to, not that it's not the performance. It's just like it was not like thought put into the engineering, right? It was just like getting it done.
Yeah,
It just happened.
There was no
like,
mic
It just
placement
happened to rip.
that I was thinking
Okay.
about.
Do it.
I couldn't top it, and I think that was because I was feeling the grief when I sang it. And later on, in later attempts, my emotions were a little bit more blank. I wasn't feeling it quite as much, so it just never came through the same way.
We had the same thing on Eden. I think it was Eden. I like asked you to like re-record some vocals because I was like, these are like a little lo-fi,
Yeah,
and he did, and he sent them to me. It was after we had finished mixing, and I was like, you know what?
Yeah.
The ones that are there, even if there's like a little bit of like this, that, or the other that I wasn't like thrilled about from an engineering perspective, or like a certain like pre-processing thing in terms of like what I was trying to do, at the end of the day, it lost whatever the emotional thing is that's in Eden in like the verses in this instance. It wasn't there. So I was like, just feels flat. Like, I don't care that it's better, quote unquote. Like,
performance.
it's just not. It isn't actually better to listen to. So I kept the demo, quote unquote.
Is that sort of a mentality of sort of just like getting that sort of emotional response from the lyrics and from the music, and just like no matter what, sort of also with everything else with the album and the songs, because I feel that this all these songs on the album are very well produced and very just sort of like, it sounds very good. But then you're also saying to me like, oh, this is just like a demo that did seem like it's like pre-production or post-production. So like, is that sort of mentality unique to these two songs, or is it just sort of just like something that sort of like was out for the whole album in general?
Michael produced, mixed and mastered the album, and he probably has a lot more insight into that than I do.
Yeah, I find so given the context of everything that's just been said, I find the like from like a very literal perspective, the production of the record very fascinating, because it is very the aesthetics of the creation of the record, I guess, are completely different than the aesthetics of the record, purely by necessity. Not even getting the mixing. I obviously I wasn't there for like the recording of it because Casey did all of it in his house. but it's like goes beyond that because I am you record and kind of write at the same time like I do, right?
I do.
Like you don't like come up with a part. I mean, you might like come up with a chord progression and go record it, but like
It's-
you're generally like, this is it. I'm gonna go record it right
I
now.
literally do Legos.
And I'm the same way.
Brian
Like, I
Wilson
don't like
style.
write and then hold on to it.
Okay.
It just
Yeah.
goes straight into the DAW or I
Okay.
forget.
Mm-hmm.
And so Casey was working from is still working from home as far as, but like was working from home at the time at a job data entry, right?
Yeah.
That like just had a lot of downtime.
Okay.
So
No, it's fine.
because you don't do that job
I set
anymore.
I set macros to like program most of my day, automate most of my day.
Yeah, but the point being, so he's like between like doing like data entries stuff is like for whatever reason that's entirely personal to Casey, feeling like very inspired to because it's physically the same. It's like two monitors right next to each other. So it's like
Mhm.
data entry, okay,
Exactly.
Logic, right? Like and like
Cubase.
you're in Cubase? I thought you were in Logic.
No, it's okay.
Excuse me, I don't use either, obviously. So
My girlfriend will love this conversation.
Shout out
that
to
is
Tyler's girlfriend.
bizarre to me because I can't do that. If I get started on something, I'll get completely sucked in. I also work from home, but I have a very different type of job also, to be fair. But like, but then on top of that, so what we're doing here is we're like recording the exact material, 100% of it. Guitar tones, the only things that weren't recorded physically in that room were the drum, like, and not even all the percussion, just the drum kit on Golden Gate, Bel Esprit, and Forever Green.
Mhm.
Every single other sound was recorded in Casey's home office, largely between data entry automation,
Yep.
which also means usually during like the middle of the day and like the morning.
Yeah.
Like I'd
Yeah.
be getting demos at like 10 a.m.
Yes. Morning is my
of like, check
inspired
out this thing
hour.
I just made. What do you think? And it would be like Bel Esprit, and I'd be like,
Okay.
I mean, what? Like where this going? I just came up with this. I'm like, I just woke up. What is going on here?
I do that to you a
Um,
lot. I'm sorry.
No, not in a bad way. It's more like I can't like I do all my stuff happens like afternoon or like well into the night because that's just
when I'm
I
napping.
think of stuff.
Yeah, I'm a morning
And-
person.
So to me, like the contrast between the music being completely created in a home office in the middle of the day in Greensboro between data entry work, besides I'm sure the little bits that were done not well on the job, and then mixing it like in my attic, is completely aesthetically different from this very like pastoral, like kind of old world, like very like melancholy but
Impressionistic.
full of color and life and impressionist. It's like totally the opposite.
It's kind of
And
It-
it's like it's
yeah.
almost in spite of the situation.
yes. Yeah.
And-
yeah.
Yeah.
It happened very fast. Like I remember him being like, I have ideas. And then like it was maybe like 4 months later. Like I'm not saying the record was done, but like it was pretty much all down. Like of just like
Yeah.
just
all
a
sketched out.
phrase. Like I remember showing up one time and he's like, hey, I'm working on this thing. And it was like all of the piano for the ending of Parasol, like in the MIDI that he was like, yeah, I just vibed this out and I'm about to throw this drum on there. And I was like,
If I may chime in,
Yeah.
a lot of my writing style, at least for this album, I also, to tie back to Impressionism, I realized Impressionism is very spur of the moment.
Mhm.
A painter would go outside and just paint the scene with the sunlight exactly as it is.
And they were
capture that.
ridiculed for it as well.
And they
like,
had
just
to
sort
move
of, like, going out
fast.
there. Yeah.
And that's what I'm doing. I'm improvising almost every part.
yes.
And if I don't like the improvisation, I'll just scrap it. I don't just leave it there or anything, but I wait till I improv a perfect take.
yeah.
And you can hear that in like the piano for Parasol at the end. Like
Yeah.
you
it's
can't
like a
write
lot of,
that.
like,
It's very
quote-unquote
random
wrong notes
and wrong notes.
or like noise. Like there's a lot of guitar takes that have like quote unquote wrong things in them, but like
Yeah.
but they're not meant to be isolated. Like a lot of these songs have like 5 different electric guitar parts playing at the same time sometimes, and
Mhm.
or more, and an acoustic part. It's when you
Accordion,
stick them all
music box.
together and you blend them in, and they're all like panned a specific ways. Casey kind of likes these big stereo things, and like is not big on like double tracking on the wides, like putting something to the left and something else to the right. You put it all together, and even though there's a lot of quote unquote mistakes and things like that that come from just improvising everything and just recording all of it
Mm-hmm.
until it lands on I like this. All the mistakes, as they could be described in another studio, are just like emotion, the character of the final product, and it doesn't sound like Mistakes. It just sounds like a band.
I also have my mic running like, at least back then I had it running 24/7. So if somebody's in my room having a conversation with me, shout out to my wife Sophia. I will be recording that, or I was recording that. Not anymore. That's not happening now. And
maybe we need these red lights right here.
You hear a lot of voices on the album, just like talking and laughing, and that's me like grabbing some of that. And sometimes I'm speeding it up or making it slow and weird. Other times I'll just record the audio of the French film I have playing on YouTube and like grab bits and pieces of that. Please don't sue me. I made sure it's outside of the copyright limits, but
And
free
distorted.
Use. Yeah, and very distorted. Like it doesn't. I'm chopping up each word.
You're creatively, what is that? It's like you're parodying it or something. Like you're creatively altering it. So it's like something.
We can call it a
filing
parody.
this under the dumb Starbucks parody law.
Shout out to Nathan for you. So that's happening a lot too, and that's part of the impressionism. Hear my voice crack there? That was embarrassing. Part of the impressionism I was trying to bring in, because like those moments will never happen again. Like that conversation will never happen the very same way, and I caught it, and it's a piece of that point in time. So the album, even though it's channeling an era in the past that never really existed anywhere but my imagination after seeing Impressionist paintings, it's also very much of its time. It's like it's capturing inside that square CD case that we have on the table here is like November 2021 through like May 2022.
Yeah,
that's the time frame that I recorded the instruments of the album.
Is that when the majority of the album work was done also, or like
we mixed
how
it
long
later.
was it?
It was
from like start to finish. What'd you say? I
think
you could put a start date to it.
The majority of it was finished in about 4 months. There's a couple songs that I messed around with for a couple months later, but like I said, like Michael was giving an explanation of, it just poured out of me. I didn't have to work on this album.
Like
it
I
just
would
happened.
literally it'd be like, sorry, I'd get Bel Esprit, and then like a week later I'd get like, here's a demo sketch, and it would be like a rough version of the entirety of Forever Green, and I'm just like, what? And he's like, yeah, I just thought of this the other day.
Was that
Michael's like, that structure will never ever work.
Well, it worked when it was done. I'll say I gave it option.
Yeah.
Was that during quarantine that time, or was it kind of like
things were getting a little bit more relaxed?
Getting more relaxed. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think it's like it's so fascinating. Just like when you give somebody time and you just get at like something, not necessarily boredom, but just like just sort of it's like being there like at home. You could just like it can pour so much out of somebody, and that seems like that's what happened with you.
Yeah, it's not even boredom. It's some people say that like
boredom was a bad word. Sorry.
No, not at all. It actually made perfect sense, and I get exactly what you meant. But in my case, it was not boredom, but it was like the freedom of finally not having to go to work and come back home from work physically every day.
Yeah.
I feel like the whole world opened up to me in that moment when I realized I have these extra hours. Why am I not using those to record an album? Something that I can be really happy about instead of just going to work and going to bed. And I think that the pandemic, that was a very big silver lining of the pandemic in my personal experience.
Yeah.
My whole like thought process towards music changed. My take on Eden, conceptually, I knew Michael was writing a song called Eden to Carry, and I thought to myself for the quickest second, is it going to be like stepping on his toes if I release a song called Eden, potentially before our song even comes out? And I thought to myself, we both love Luna Sea. How could it be?
Yeah, that's.
I mean, like Luna Sea has an album called Eden, and that's a visual kei band that inspires like almost all of my guitar playing. And I always knew I wanted to write something called Eden because that album is very evocative of something. It's something ethereal and something dreamlike, and it's kind of like just the idealized version of the Garden of Eden, I think. And so I thought to myself, what's my ideal version of the Garden of Eden? And that's the first human was born made androgynous. There's no man, there's no woman, and they are very fulfilled and happy in this garden, but maybe it's God's horrible sense of humor, but he just rips a woman out of this person's side, and then there's man and woman, and they're no longer happy. And there's a line in the song about, now I sympathize more with the serpent. And it sounds really dramatic, of course, like to say like I sympathize with the devil, not God. But like we've all grown up in this Bible Belt, and we've all been told like Satan is evil and God is good, and we've only ever heard these, at least for me, I've only ever heard these like horrible things that God did in the Bible. So I'm thinking to myself, why do we look down on the serpent, Satan, for offering knowledge when God is the one that like did these horrible things without any explanation? I have to assume he just thinks it's funny.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be offensive to any Christian listeners. I have respect for you. I would love to have a conversation about this if you want to hit me up.
I also really like with Eden. I appreciate the sort of seamless transition between it and Golden Gates. So like, it was a lot, very seamless transition. I always love it when what albums are like that, where you can listen through track 1 to 12 and just have a very sort of seamless way.
That was very intentional.
Yeah.
I wanted the whole album to flow that way. And I have it, right. It's 8 songs, and it's divided. If you look at the back if you have a copy of the CD at home, which is made to look like a vinyl record, it says side A and side B. Obviously, you can't flip a CD, but I designed it to work like a vinyl record. So when I can finally afford to press it onto vinyl, it will be listened as intended. Or even a cassette. I mean, like it's set up into 2 halves, and the first half being like, it's one specific aesthetic, and the second half is another one. And I think it's sort of like songs 1 through 4, which are Eden, Golden Gate, Song of Healing, and The Endless, are kind of pulling from my previous influences just a little bit. Like I'm kind of coming off the first album. But when you get to tracks 5 through 8, which are Forever Green, Bel Esprit, Parasol, Deep Sky, and The Alchemist, they're venturing off into a territory I've never touched. And it's certainly the direction I want to keep pursuing in the future. So although the whole album does cohesively fit, it does follow that sort of trajectory, and I had to split it that way in my mind.
Like it gets weirder as it goes.
It does. It gets weirder.
I feel that as a listener who did not write the record, it is a very deeply strange record that is masquerading, quote unquote, like normal guitar music. Like the more you pull,
I love you
like,
for that.
Like The Alchemist, there we put like a EDM like filter sweep at the end.
Yeah, only on the hand drums.
On the hand drum, but it sounds like an EDM filter sweep on like a bossa nova track. Like,
it's
goofy,
and the whole track otherwise is so organic, so it's really interesting.
Definitely, I do definitely feel that with just more elements being added as you go through the album.
It becomes more and more of a dream.
Yes.
In a way. Kind of drifting deeper and deeper.
That's a good way to describe it. We did kind of go out of order a little bit. We talked about Bella Spirit, then Eden, but I do want to talk about Song of Healing.
Okay.
So I couldn't really get this one down. It does definitely feel like you're sort of taking the listener through a journey. What is that journey specifically? Like what is it? Because I'm listening, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if it's like when I listened to it while I was writing down these notes, but I was definitely sort of completely just sort of out of my mind with it all. So
yeah. So have you ever played Majora's Mask?
Yes.
Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. The Song of Healing is a very important song in the game, it's just Zelda's lullaby in reverse.
Yeah.
And canonically, you can correct me if I'm wrong about what it sort of means in the game, but it's a song of healing which releases these spirits who are trapped in this negative place, and just, I mean, it doesn't ever say that they're dying and going to the afterlife or whatever, but that's what's happening. And I wanted to give myself a song of healing because at least in the first album, that era of my life after the tragedies, I was sort of stuck in this shell. I was literally a shell of who I was before that. And the Song of Healing is literally like me laying out all of the things that, or at least some of the things that happened in that time, and trying my very best to like forcibly pull the positivity out of that. And it does go on a journey, and it ends up in a place that's still kind of dark, and that wasn't intentional. I was kind of like upset that I couldn't end it on a major way without it feeling fake or corny, so I just ended it with like that nasty scream. Like it kind of didn't work.
I like that too.
My Song of Healing didn't heal me, but
after
you're hearing the
the little piano.
Yeah, like trails
doing, like
off.
that. To
Yeah.
me, it does end on like positive and healing aren't necessarily the same thing.
That's true, and that's
know what I
also
mean?
the thesis
Like sometimes
of
you need
Song
to
of Healing in The
do
Legend of Zelda.
the blast beat at the end of the song.
Yeah.
And also just like with that sort of healing, like you may have not like necessarily felt like that was the ending where you feel healed. But for me personally, like whenever I have like a burst of emotion like that, whether that's just like by myself or just like sort of like in my mind mentally, I feel like I have overcome something. So I mean, I don't know. It's
Catharsis.
so it
Yeah.
definitely does seem like. I don't know.
And that was actually spontaneous. It happened in the song at the end of the final little riff. Like it was gonna just trail off, and so this is the third time that this specific riff happens in the song. It's a specific melody, and it was gonna just kind of trail off like the first two times. But in this last time, I felt so overwhelmed and frustrated. I was like, I don't know why. It just hit me. It bubbled up from inside, and I was like, I just started screaming and hitting the acoustic guitar. And then I realized, well, that's not the ending I wanted, but that's the ending we got. It sounds pretty cool, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And so I threw down a blast beat on the drums and called it a
Discord
day.
piano too.
Yeah.
I've soloed that piano. It is like a child bay. It's not a key. It is like a.
I
it does-
did.
It
I
feels
banged on it.
correct, but
Yeah.
it's literally complete nonsense. And
Yeah.
then right when the scream is done, that complete nonsense kind of finds a key.
Yes.
I find that very, very interesting
that
Yeah.
was subconscious, but that's it.
because that's the healing part.
The lyrics also, like, I write my lyrics and I focus hard on the lyrics I write, but some of the lines that I come up with are improvised as I'm just like humming out a melody.
Mhm.
They'll just come. And
Right
then I'll
around it.
write a whole song around these words that just felt right for that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll change things a million times, but initially some of those words that I just improvised are probably going to be there.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Do you know what words, if there's any particular line in Song of Healing that came out like that you wrote around?
Your warm embrace. The chorus, your warm
the part I'm
embrace.
identifying as the part of self-acceptance and healing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Look at that.
Because it is a song to
So you had to
myself,
write self-deprecation in order
about
to get to that,
myself.
like for
Mhm.
yourself, because you wrote the self-deprecating parts with intention, but the part that came to you naturally was like the like more accepting.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Let them. And
Therapy.
there's a line in
Boom.
it that's I'm just singing to myself in the
Live on the
mirror.
radio.
Live.
And the guy in the mirror
Quote,
is
unquote.
singing every single word back at me, and his face is only apathy.
Exactly.
But behind the glass, he bleeds with each word.
Look at
So-
me knowing more.
I'm talking to myself throughout the song. That's the concept.
Awesome.
Sorry, that was a long tangent, but you
No,
opened up that can of worms.
No, don't worry. I love
What you have is content. Edit.
I love opening up cans of worms because I also do enjoy just listening to people.
And fishing.
And fishing, yeah. Okay. So, all right. Is there anything else that you want to mention before I sign off and shoot over to you for socials and whatnot, or no? Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you want to touch on?
I don't think there's a specific concept that I guess I should give credit for one thing. The Alchemist has a main theme that is played in the oboe part in the beginning of the song by my dear friend Abby the oboist. Shout out to her. She is literally TikTok famous and incredible at what she does. But she played that on oboe, but that's a melody that my wife Sophia was singing one day, just like humming to herself, and I told her to come in my room and just record it into the microphone. And I just built a song around it. And then I wrote words to this melody and decided that I couldn't escape the melody, so it's just got to go on and on throughout the whole song, whether it's me singing or something else. And I decided I'm going to get a guest performer, Abby, which is the only guest besides Michael who did anything on the album. But yeah, Sophia went uncredited for that, but I do have to give credit where it's due because that song couldn't exist otherwise.
All right. So before we get off the record, I guess, where can we find more of you at Canary?
Well, I exist on all the expected social media platforms, of course, and I do believe that my handle on all of them Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook is at canary.complex, or Facebook is just /canary.complex. And if it doesn't work with a dot, try without, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. I'm on TikTok, but it's not a Canary Complex specific account. It's more my personal TikTok where I play Visual K guitar covers. And it's a lot of fun. But I'm also playing a show at Ruby Deluxe here in Raleigh on June 8th with Neem the Animist. And shout out to Tweakin and Carrie, who are also on the show. And one of my favorite artists, Camus Leonardo, is hosting the event. That's going to be a lot of fun. And that is coming up this Saturday.
Nice. This has been WKNC 88.1 FM Raleigh. I've been your host, The Loaf. This has been Canary Complex. Again, awesome. I'm going to leave you off with 2 songs off of Canary's The Tragic Dance of Dying Leaves album, Bel Esprit, right?
Bel Esprit.
Bel Esprit, and Song of Healing. So, thank you very much for listening. Thank you so much, Canary, again, for coming on.
Thank you, Tyler.
And
I enjoyed every second. Truly.
I did too. And thank you. So thank you, listeners. Peace. I'm
done it.
That was a fun interview.
Did I pour you from a bottle, misquote you in the Bible? Would the God I know consider those the same? The bitterness has faded a little, but it's taken so long. In a solitary basement, I prayed that you would save him, and got high enough to forget my name. I never found the savior when all my wrapping papers were gone.
My phone spins out, wires are crossed, hands and light
Just won't turn off. A television flickers and whispers the weather. Today's cold, so cold. Your warm embrace, in the form of a sedative, relinquish the day. Alarm clock is screaming, God damn, you're hungover. There's no shame in breathing. There's no decay of our plans. Is this evidence of madness? I dive into